Larger countries and developed nations are complicit in the existential threat of small island developing states. Those are strong words coming from the Minister of Finance of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Camilo Gonzalez. I'm Andre Huey, and this is the IMF Daily Report, reporting on the IMF World Bank annual spring meetings here in Washington, D.C., as we give you coverage of the various meetings and the sideline meetings that take place here at the IMF and the World Bank. Just to let you know that this report was brought to you by the kind compliments of Hope Economics. So I had an interview with Camilo Gonzalez, the Minister of Finance of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who happened to chair the Commonwealth Small Island Developing States meeting that was held on the sidelines on Wednesday this week, where he addressed the issue of climate change and the effects of climate change on climate vulnerabilities were brought forward in that meeting. And of course, the small island developing countries represented in that meeting made their case strong for additional support and the promises that have been made, that those promises be fulfilled. What Mr. Gonzalez is essentially saying is that these unfulfilled promises of funding for small island developing states is contributing to the threats posed by climate change.
What we've seen is a lot of creative accounting to say that money has been allocated, but on the ground in our countries, you'd be hard-pressed to find any Caribbean country that could say that all of these commitments have moved the needle in making us more resilient or less vulnerable. A lot more work has to be done at the political level to go beyond declarations, and there's a lot of intense activity always to craft a declaration and not a lot of follow-up work to measure what has to be done. We in the Caribbean have to view a failure to, not just the Caribbean, small states, we have to view failures to commit, failures to follow through as hostile acts against our country. Because if climate change is an existential threat, if climate change is a threat that could wipe us off the map, then countries that say they will help us but then refuse are aiding and abetting our own destruction. And we have to therefore follow up more aggressively and as advocates to not be ashamed to point out to countries, look, you promised to put in X amount of money. You promised to make this sort of a commitment. You have not followed through. You have to follow through if you want to consider us your friend.
Mr. Gonzalez also called on multilateral groups such as the IMF and the World Bank to use different metrics to determine the conditions of which these countries, especially those in the Caribbean, receive funding. What he's saying that the gross national income or income per capita or GDP, which is used to determine how wealthy a country is not the correct metrics to use for small island developing countries in the Caribbean, because there are a lot of issues that are associated with that, and it doesn't give an accurate picture, a true picture of what actually is happening in these countries.
In very small countries, St. Kitts and Nevis, for example, you have 50,000 people. If you look at the per capita GDP, per capita GNI, you would think that everybody in St. Kitts is wealthy. But that's not the case. It's that you have an amount of money divided by a very small number of persons, so it's a misleading number that is created. Similarly, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines with 110,000 people. Income per capita is not a measure in the Caribbean context, in a small state context, of wealth. You need other measures, and you need to consider vulnerability. And when you don't, you run into these situations where people are trying to take money, needed money, away from you, and to say, well, you guys are better off and you guys are wealthy. We know that in the Caribbean and in small states, first of all, there are intractable pockets of poverty that have to be dealt with. And secondly, there are high levels of vulnerability. We're among the most vulnerable countries in the world.
So just some of the issues raised in an interview I had with Mr. Camilo Gonzalez, the Minister of Finance of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We also spoke on a number of other issues, but in the coming days, we'll be sharing those with you. Reporting on the IMF annual spring meetings, as well as the World Bank Group meetings here at Washington, D.C. at the IMF headquarters. I'm Andre Huey for SKN Newsline.
Hope Economics is an economic and development consulting firm specializing in economic policy, advising, business and trade advisory, research and project management. We work with governments, private sector agencies, multinational institutions, and non-profit organizations across the Caribbean region. Led by principal consultant Kevin Hope, Hope Economics applies rigorous analytic skills and local knowledge to address key challenges facing Caribbean economies. They work closely with governments and partners to design evidence-based solutions and support sustainable development across the region. For more information or to book services, email admin@hopeeconomics.com or contact WhatsApp 268-721-0936 or 203 257-8785. Hope Economics. Your dreams are our mission.